Thank you.
"500 years from now, this is a valuable legacy for people to come and look back at. And if you can't see it and can't find it, what a great record of how we felt during World War II. What the United States was like during Vietnam. What happened when Russia gave up communism for the first time in how many years, and things changed. Here's historically what was going on in the United States. Here's how people thought. This is the way they dressed. This is the way they spoke. This is what they admired. This is what they hated. This is what they read. This is the music that they played. This is what they thought was dramatic. This is what they thought was boring. And that's, you know, you can't put a price on that. That's a valuable, valuable heritage.
In 1929, the Museum of Modern Art was founded as an institution devoted to the visual arts, with an emphasis on the only great art form unique to the 20th century, the motion picture.
The film department was an idea that started in the late 1920s, when Alfred Barr, who was the founding director of the museum, conceived the notion that this museum should include all the visual arts of the 20th century, not just those arts made by an individual, a painter or a sculptor, but those arts that had been made for mass use. Alfred Barr understood that all the arts of a particular period must be studied in order to understand your times and the arts of your time. He found a very bright, very perceptive, lively woman in Iris Berry, who was working in the museum's library. And he also got to know one of the museum's trustees, John Hay Whitney, who was a collector of paintings, but also an investor in the movie business. John Hay Whitney arranged for Iris Berry to go to Hollywood in 1935 to meet the top people in the film industry and tell them that film was an art form and invite them to contribute to a new film library at the Museum of Modern Art. So Iris Berry went out to Pickfair to a reception hosted in her honor and met Douglas Fairbanks, Mary Pickford, Charlie Chaplin, film directors and producers. And she showed them Great Train Robbery, Chaplin's The Gold Rush, Walt Disney's newest film, Pluto's Judgment Day, filmed in 1935, and she told them that these were films that belonged in an art museum and should be seriously studied, and that they would all be in danger of disappearing. The 40 years of film history would fade if people in the industry did not make these contributions to enable us to collect and preserve their work. They were astonished. Their reaction was one of astonishment. They did not think their works belonged in a museum of art.
After years of persuasion, Iris Berry convinced the Hollywood studios and filmmakers that their work did indeed belong in a museum for serious study and presentation. In 1939, the Museum of Modern Art opened its new building on New York's West 53rd Street and began public exhibition of its films from an international collection, ranging from Porter's The Great Train Robbery to Eisenstein's Que Viva Mexico, as well as the works of American masters Charlie Chaplin and John Ford. Over the years, the museum's collection has expanded to include posters, stills, storyboards, and set designs in order to preserve and promote the motion picture as legitimate art.
art is a human endeavor. It's a way of self-expression. Film art has to do with, not only with light and shadow and movement, but it has to do with an artist or a person or a group of people doing a job well.
According to the 19th century Romantic tradition, for every great art, there must be a great artist. The motion picture found its creative genius in D.W. Griffith.
50 years ago, Iris Barry, along with Lillian Gish, were able to convince D.W. Griffith to deposit all of his feature films with the museum. Subsequently, they were also able to acquire the Biograph collection, which included most of the short films that Griffith had produced for that company.
The D.W. Griffith collection is really invaluable for scholars and film historians because we can study his progress, his development of the language of film from the short films in which he's beginning to work out methods of creating film narrative, to his feature films, Birth of a Nation, Intolerance, Way Down East, in which you see how he develops thematic unity, the structure, how he cuts and photographs the action, and of course how he puts all of these things together to create great expressive power, to tell a powerful story.
Griffith helped establish the techniques of film storytelling and did it swiftly, precisely, and with a great deal of the energy. He used and developed various techniques of filmmaking in the service of telling a story very, very well. Fade-outs, fades-in, close-ups, parallel storytelling so that two actions are happening simultaneously. All those aspects. He didn't invent any one of them, but he developed them to close to perfection.
Not since Walt Whitman, said Iris Barry, had an American artist of such power and strength emerged on the scene. With such praise, it would seem only a tragedy if Griffith no longer had anything to show for it. But like most of the filmmakers of his time, he had no idea that over the years, his films were slowly turning to dust.
A large body of films that have not necessarily deteriorated, but are simply worn out from having been used again and again and again. Negatives and prints of the most beloved popular films are exhausted, so to speak, and new prints and negatives must be made of these films.
Film degradation takes many forms. For nitrate and also for safety film, there's a chemical process of deterioration which is irreversible. Film as an art should be preserved in its original form. Our work now in preservation will ensure that.
Our biggest problem is lack of funds. We urgently need funding to support our ability to carry out this work in sufficient quantities every year to enable us to see the job through. If this work is not completed, films will continue to deteriorate, and 50 years from now, existing films without preservation could all have disintegrated, could all have faded. And the public, we would hope, would support legislation in governments, state and federal level, that endorse and support preservation of films. Tax dollars do go towards preservation. We would like to see more tax dollars go to preservation. And we would hope that people would want to contribute to archives and libraries and museums in their community that are doing this work.
AMC thanks TV Guide for their support of film preservation.